My name is Ruha Benjamin. I'm a professor in sociology and African American studies, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of the Office of the Student of Deans, the Department of Anthropology, the Center for the Study of Religion, Culture, and World Affairs, as well as the Department for International Relations. Here we are at the fourth in a series of screenings and conversations in the Boston area this weekend to kick off an important new initiative called Education Under Fire, which is advancing the universal right of education by focusing on an extreme case of the denial of that right among Baha'is in Iran. To get us started, I just want to say a word about the genealogy of Boston University, a genealogy that reveals that the right to education is more than an abstract ideal and platitude for us. This commitment is in our DNA, part of the conception by our abolitionist founders who understood the power of educational access to address social ills in the aftermath of slavery. Part of our gestation as the first university that opened all its divisions to women, the first to award a PhD to a woman, and was the first co-ed medical college in the world. And so this right to education is part of our development as the first university to grant a medical degree to an African American woman, the first to hire an African American Howard Thurman, a dean, to serve as dean for the first predominantly white university, who went on to mentor Martin Luther King, who walked the same route to class as you now do. Perhaps less well known is that at a time when xenophobia was on the rise against Japanese Americans, our university insisted on admitting Japanese students, so that while officials on the West Coast were forcing people into internment camps, BU was admitting them to college. And most relevant perhaps for our gathering today, Boston University was among the first, if not the first, institution in the world to officially recognize the grassroots university in Iran that's the focus of the documentary and discussion today. So after the Iranian government was busy going to great lengths to shut down this underground institution, BU was admitting one of its graduates to the master's program in social work here. This willingness to stand on principle in the face of injustice, institutional daring, shall we call it, is part of our DNA and should make us proud. Proud, but not self-satisfied. Because what can easily get overshadowed in overemphasizing these token firsts is what lies beneath it, always bubbling, sometimes erupting, and that's the commitment and courage of students who push the institution to respond to issues of social justice and human rights. You, the students, who easily get written out of the institutional development story in favor of the great man version. And so as a consequence, you may not always realize your own power to affect change. One quick example before we get on to the main act. BU students in the 80s faced expulsion by the university for hanging anti-apartheid signs outside the dorms, including one sign that said, "Tyranny reigns with good people do nothing." The students eventually won a lawsuit against administrators who kept removing their signs and trying to expel them. The BU Student Union at the time joined with student unions across the country to challenge the university administration to stop investing millions of dollars into the South African economy. This collective action on the part of students in the US and bolstered the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, contributing to the eventual downfall of that inhumane system. So while the extent of human rights violations may have changed and strategies may be different now, what hasn't changed is that international dissent against injustice, spurred by students, can lead to social transformation. Perhaps the main hurdle to get over is a lack of confidence in what can come from unified action. So today's film and discussion is part of a larger Education Under Fire effort to unify our actions and animate the kind of global solidarity and accountability that shakes us out of our daily routines and forces us to ask the question, what do we owe each other? From Johannesburg to Boston in the 80s, from Tahrir Square to Oscar Grant Plaza in Oakland last month, to Tehran to a dysfunctional office near you this week. Our collective consciousness is wrestling with this question: what do we owe each other in the face of injustice that threatens our humanity? To move the conversation along then, I welcome someone who really needs no introduction, human rights activist, actor, and comedian, Mr. Rainn Wilson.
So much. Thanks for the warm welcome. That was, what an amazing talk that was. That's incredible, the history of BU and all the stuff that this college has done. That's fantastic. I had no idea. Thanks so much for having me. I know you guys are busy in your class schedules and whatnot, and thanks for taking time out and showing up at this time. Really, really appreciate it. It's very hard for me because I love to sit up here and I love to tell jokes for 25 minutes, but yes. Unfortunately, someone said yes. No, I can't. I'm not really here for that. You know, this is a film that I really want to support. It's a cause that's very near and dear to my heart. I want to share it with you guys and with the other students and faculty and deans of Boston. We've been at many other colleges in our short stay here. We're going to have a panel discussion afterwards. You were handed note cards when you came in, so if you have questions that come up for you during the film, feel free to write those down on the note cards. And there's also very much a call to action that you've also been given on a piece of paper here, and we'll talk more about what you specifically can do about this just devastating situation, human rights situation in Iran. So enjoy the film. We'll meet the filmmaker and the producer, and I'll talk a little bit more afterwards. Thanks so much.
We have a great panel, but we want to start off with our guest of honor and ask Rainn Wilson if he would come up and just probably answer a question a lot of us have, and that's what gets you involved? Why this human rights issue? How does it resonate with your personal and professional life? If you could share with us a little bit about that before our panel, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. I'm a member of the Baha'i faith. My family is as well. My parents were Baha'is. I've got aunts and uncles, and my wife and son. And I kept hearing about this, and the more I learned, the more my eyes were opened to this fact that there's 300,000 people that believe a certain thing, a very peaceful religion that just wants harmony between the races and equality of men and women, and peace and love and unity on earth and all of that kind of stuff. 300,000 in Iran unable to get an education, and there have been all kinds of persecutions against the Baha'is in Iran from the get-go. Tens of thousands were put to death, and after the Iranian Revolution, they were just simply kill Baha'is, but there was such an international outcry that they decided to use all these other measures to try and just kind of quash the Baha'i community. And it really opened my eyes when I thought about this as a human rights issue, because we think about certain kind of inalienable human rights, but the right to get an education, if you want to get an education, and you have the ability and the means and the wherewithal to get an education. I mean, I keep thinking here we are in Boston and all these amazing universities here. It's really a center of learning for the world. Maybe the preeminent city of learning in the entire world. And could you imagine if the US government hated Buddhists, and you were a Buddhist, and you went and you applied at BU, and they're like, you're a Buddhist, no way. And then you went to Harvard, you went to BC, you couldn't even go to community college up the road. No place would allow you. And so then you get together with your other Buddhist friends and start, get some borrowed textbooks and labs and start working, and then and not only that, you're arrested, and the teachers that are helping you are arrested and put into prison. It's a mind-boggling thing. We take our education here really for granted in the United States, and I believe that education it's not just a nice thing to get a job. it's an important part of being a human being. It's what makes us who we are. It's good for our hearts and our minds and our souls. And I have a 7-year-old son, and I think about his education and how if we lived in Iran, if by chance, circumstance, we were Iranians and born in Iran, that he couldn't learn in Iran. So I love this project. I got to know I'd like to introduce the executive producer, David Hoffman. Can you stand up? He really made this project happen, and got to working with him, and just wanted to lend my support for this. And we'll talk more. We'll introduce Jeff Kaufman as well, the director, and then I know you'll have questions, and then there's a call for action at the end. Thank you.
So at this time, I'd like to ask our other panelists to come up, and I'll introduce them briefly. Jeff Kaufman, Mojdeh Rohani, and Josh Rubenstein. Please join us on stage.
Josh brought that chair. The only chair right here.
All right, so let me just very briefly introduce them so that you know who you're addressing your questions to. Mojdeh Rohani came to the U.S. as a refugee from Iran. She earned her BA in psychology from this grassroots university, the BIHE, then she applied for a degree in social work here at BU. So when I mentioned that BU was one of the first universities to accept the credits from this university in Iran, she is that applicant, who now is an adjunct faculty member in the School of Social Work. She's also a clinician. She works with survivors of torture and other types of human rights violations from around the world. Jeff Kaufman, to the far right, has produced 10 short films for Amnesty International, including one around their maternity health campaign. He works on numerous pro bono projects, including one around the New Orleans health clinic in the Lower Ninth Ward, and he's produced several Discovery Channel programs. And then finally, last but not least, Josh Rubenstein, who's the Northeast Regional Director for Amnesty International and has worked in this area of international affairs and human rights for over 35 years. So let's just welcome our panel. Start with Mojdeh Rohani. As someone who has actually gone through the BIHE and experienced that firsthand and applied to BU, if you could tell us a little bit about what it's like for those of us who haven't experienced that kind of persecution, and then the process of applying to BU and what you've learned from this entire experience.
You know, we have been at a number of events over the weekend, and I was talking to a group of students and faculty at MIT on Friday, and I really started by saying that, you know, even the fact that you could come here today freely, and you were not worried that on the way you may be arrested, somebody may question you as to where you're going, why you're going there, what is the purpose of that. You didn't have that fear. You didn't have a fear of applying to be you. You didn't have a fear of walking with your friends on the street and being worried about who these friends are and what may be the consequences for you. From very basic facts, those were the things, the freedoms that we did not have in Iran. And Baha'is and many other groups do not have those type of freedoms in Iran. BU being a very international university, I know that some of you do come from countries where you have experienced human rights violations, and some don't, fortunately. But I really want to also make that an invitation for us as a school to really raise awareness for ourselves and collectively as a group, because we can no longer afford to live in a world where we are just concerned about what is important to us. So it's not good enough if, you know, we all have the freedom to do what we want to do at BU, and you can come from other places and, you know, take advantage of what is available here, but that we can take action to make it possible for everybody else in other parts of the world. I have now professors who are in prison. I have classmates, former classmates, who are sitting in prison. I have friends and I have family members who are in prison. So I take it upon myself, and I want to invite you to join me, because we have freedom here to do something about that, and they don't. We have so many different types of freedom that we take for advantage here. So I want you to pay attention to all there is that is available to us. And we really need to grow an appreciation for that, because it's great. In many other parts of the world, people have to fight to get that. So let's just join forces today and take some action about it.
Our next question is for the director, Jeff Kaufman. In terms of the behind-the-scenes process, the kinds of connections and collaborations that brought this project to fruition, can you give us a sense of what went behind that, what was behind that, and then also how this fits into the larger campaign around education inspired?
The larger campaign is really inspiring. This is part of it, so it's great to see so many people here. I hope people will find out more about Iran, more about the Baha'is of Iran, and more about this campaign. And you can go to www.educationunderfire.com to do so. It's always evolving, and it'd be great to have you participate in that process. Behind the scenes, it's interesting. It was so inspiring to work on a project like this. Any project you start is a little daunting at the beginning, and you wonder, well, how am I going to do certain things? In this case, we couldn't go to Iran, and yet we wanted to bring alive the people and the work, and just so many things came together. Working with David was wonderful, having guidance from so many tremendous people, getting to know people like Mojdeh and her husband Nikhan, who just blow you away with their good hearts and their willingness to cooperate. But we also had this miraculous thing happen, like, we need footage from Iran, and there's a guy you saw in the film named Pedro, Rashan, and he would send emails to people he knew, Baha'is and non-Baha'is. He had a lot of Muslim friends in Iran who were helping us. And we'd send off wish lists of shots, like, can we get a shot inside a class, people working together, or can we get a shot of panning down the street at night and moving up to an actual BIHE locked door. I mean, it's a pretty specific thing. Or, hey, Pedro, can we get shots of recreating your trip from Sari to Tehran, but please don't get the guys arrested doing it. And like 3 days later, the footage was shown via an email. It was an amazing thing. So it's behind the scenes, but it also just touches you by the spirit. The fact that we can connect to Iran, they can connect to us, and we can, without sounding too savvy, almost become, we can also become family in this effort, is a tremendous thing. And it shows the bonds that we have, the responsibility that we have, and how we can work together. If we can do this, we can do almost anything. I was just thinking about one person who's sort of been with us, but hasn't been with us the whole process. You mentioned people you know who were arrested. The first interview I did was with Kayvon Muhammad Hassan, who you may remember in the black coat. He's married to Manya. And he talked about this one teacher who changed his life, Mr. Badavan. Just a remarkable person. And the weird thing was, wherever I traveled, people would say, oh, I know Mr. Badavan. I wouldn't even bring it up. They would just know this man, and they were touched by his spirit. And he was one of the people who was arrested in May 2011. We'd see his face in the photographs, we'd think about him. And let's think about it right now, because right this very second, he is in a prison cell. Right this very second. And right this very second, his family in Iran is suffering and worried about him. So he was sort of present throughout the whole process. And literally after we locked the film, we had to open the film up because we found out that he'd been sentenced to 5 years in prison, along with his other colleagues. So now he faces at least 5 years in prison simply for trying to teach. It's those personal connections that connect us to what it's all about, and it's what should motivate us all to keep working on behalf of this project.
Thank you, Jeff. We have a question here for Josh Rubenstein in terms of the broader context in Iran, human rights violations more broadly, and why the specific targeting of Baha'is is going on. What's unique, and also what is the pattern there?
Well, a few things. First, if it were the case that this discrimination against the Baha'i, prohibiting them from getting a higher education, was the only human rights violation in Iran, then we would be approaching this issue in one way. But in fact, this is part of a broad pattern of repression. Since the revolution in the late 70s, we've seen Iran become one of the leading countries carrying out judicial executions in the world, only outclassed by China. We believe between 300 to 400 people are executed in Iran every year by order of court, and the Baha'i are often part of that group. Iran is one of the few countries that still executes juvenile offenders, people accused of a crime alleged to have taken place when they were under the age of 18. There's widespread use of torture against political dissidents. There's widespread just arrests. Obviously, during the turmoil of 2009, following the disputed election, there were thousands of people arrested, allegations of rape directed against some of these prisoners, people shot on the street. So the fact that the Baha'i are targeted because in the eyes of some Muslim leaders, it's a heresy, because I believe when the faith was begun over 100, 150 years ago, in the eyes of Baha'i, a prophet emerged, and I guess according to Muslim faith, Muhammad is regarded as the final prophet, so therefore any other faith that declares there's another prophet, that somehow is difficult for them to accept. So they do target the Baha'i for that, and that's a terrible thing, as you can see. So Amnesty campaigns, we document this abuse in the same way we're documenting abuses all over the world, and you're all welcome to go to our website, amnestyusa.org, look up all your favorite countries, look up Iran, and get an up-to-date view of what a serious human rights organization is saying about Iran, about other countries in the Middle East, given the turmoil in North Africa and the Middle East, as well as China and France and the United States. Obviously, we are campaigning on human rights violations all over the world.
Thank you for that, Josh. So this next question is directed at Mojdeh Rohani. We saw that application where people have to check off their religion, or some Christians do. So the question is, for the sake of getting into college and moving on with your life, what's the big deal? Why don't you just mark a different box? And related to that, the question is, why don't people just leave if they can? Why do they stay there under such intense persecution?
We all decide, we choose to be Baha'i, so this is our faith. And as such, our faith defines who we are. So it's a question of identity. And if you're asked about your identity, and you are pretty certain that this is who you want to be, then you weigh your options. Do you lie about who you are, or you stay true to yourself? So that's why Baha'is do not lie on applications. And school is only one part of it. We cannot obtain jobs with the public sector. Anything that's related to the government, Baha'is cannot be employed. And many hundreds and thousands have been expelled from their jobs. And in many other instances, Baha'is are asked to identify their faith, and we just do not lie, because that's who we are, and that's what we stand for, the principles of the Baha'i faith that defines us. And as a question of why we don't, leave, I mean, it's funny that you asked me this question, because I've left. I left, but, well, I want to say that I can talk on behalf of many of my friends who have left, and we are all very willing to go back and serve our country. There have been a number of occasions where I've been asked by the government of Iran, without knowing, because I'm a social worker and we have trainings to deal with disasters. I have particular training, so when we had like major earthquakes and things, I was invited to go to help in the aftermath of the earthquakes, and the minute they found out I was a Baha'i, even though I was volunteering my service, they told me that I was not allowed to go back. So we are willing to serve, because service is a very important component of the Baha'i faith. And for those who stay behind, we love our country and we love our people. Even though there is oppression and discrimination by the government and its policies, it doesn't mean that we are not hopeful about the future of this country and its people. So Baha'is persevere and they have hope. That's why they remain behind.
Thank you for that. This last question, well, not last question, the second to last question, maybe any of the panelists can address. The film mentioned the UN condemnation of Iranian oppression of Baha'is, but has the U.S. issued any comment? Is there any legislatures, any formal reaction by the U.S. government?
I have to say, keep in mind, our relationship with Iran is quite fraught right now. Obviously, going back to the Carter administration when hostages were taken, and now there's considerable tension over the development of a nuclear device in Iran. So our State Department regularly follows and monitors human rights in Iran, and every year in February and March, as part of the country reports, which we issue on every member state of the UN except the US, by the way, it's quite clear a whole range of human rights violations are identified, highlighted, as including repression of the Baha'i. That's in the U.S. country reports, which is easy to find on the website. But given the broader issues and far more dangerous issues that are now on the table, I'm not sure that you can expect the U.S. government to have much traction with the government of Iran if it were to be a leading voice in defense of human rights or in defense of human rights of Baha'i. Maybe if the European Union were to speak out, or other countries with better relations, at least more ongoing relations, that would have greater effect. Please.
There have been some congressional declarations. I just want to note, of course, that relations are fraught because of mistakes and worse on both sides. So there's a gulf to bridge on both sides. But there have been also some international statements that have been really moving. A group of, I think, 246 academics, non-Baha'is, who wrote a joint statement. They were all Iranian expatriates who wrote a statement addressing the crimes against the Baha'is. And most recently, in connection to the Education Under Fire campaign, Nobel Peace Prize laureate President Ramos Horta of East Timor and Bishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa wrote a joint statement calling for the world to acknowledge the human rights and educational rights of the Baha'is in Iran. It's a very moving statement, and you can read it on the Education Under Fire website. And you can sign on to it, so you can be a close buddy of Desmond Tutu. So please go take a look at it. It's worth seeing.
Thank you. So this question says, how can Baha'is get their rights while they actually don't get involved in politics? Are they allowed to have their own party to practice their belief in Iran or any other Islamic country?
Good question. How do you answer that? I mean, Baha'is are not involved in partisan politics, so Baha'is don't form political parties and raise money and campaign and work in politics that way. That's not to say that Baha'is are politically inactive, because Baha'is are very much for social justice and very much standing up for their own rights and the rights of other people that have been oppressed, and will use any force to, to make that happen. Even protesting, writing letters, different kinds of campaigns, and using the political processes that are in place in various states to try and achieve social justice. But they just don't work in terms of a political system.
Thank you. So this question is around the solidarity that we saw between Muslim friends and Muslim professors and students who are part of the university. And so the question is, do the Muslim friends of the Baha'is, are they able to voice their support politically? That is, are they able to push the government in any way to change their relationship with the Baha'i community? Or is that more just interpersonal solidarity? Are they able to formalize that?
It will be extremely dangerous for them to formally voice their opinions, but more and more, as we saw from the very early days of this revolution, that there have been many Muslim friends that have been supportive of the Baha'is and their plight. And now today we see a new level of awareness in the Iranian community. But for them to do that, they can very easily get the death penalty for formally standing up for the right of the Baha'is. But I have known of people who did not apply to go to university just because their Baha'i friends could not do that. So you see this level of solidarity, and that's really to be commended.
Thank you. So our last question is addressed to Rainn. What's the takeaway from the film in terms of what students can practically do? What are the next steps? How can we take our feelings around this issue and move forward?
Sure, good question. I just want to say on the Muslim issue one more time is that this film in no way paints a portrait, and I hope we're not painting a portrait where it's like Muslims versus Baha'is in Iran. That's not the case. I don't know the numbers, but I would guess the majority of the Muslims in Iran are just fine with Baha'is being there and living peacefully and getting education and having jobs. This is really about this theocracy. It's a theocracy that runs the country and their policies more than, you know, looking at Muslim-Baha'i relations. But check out educationunderfire.com. There's a lot of calls to action there. There's this letter that Jeff mentioned that was signed by the two Nobel laureates that calls for a number of different calls to action. One is, you know, contacting your local representative, and you make your position clear to them that they should support the rights of Baha'is in Iran, especially the rights to get an education and the BIHE. There's one thing that's very important, and I think BU does this already, and like Mojdeh said, BU is at the vanguard of this, is getting credits for people that have graduated from the BIHE. So contacting your teachers or your deans at whatever university, I mean, I think you're all BU students, but just supporting BU in offering credits to the BIHE is very important. But if you have contacts at other universities, we need to increase the number of universities that will give credits. And finally, finding educators that are willing to teach. It seems like the BIHE is moving more towards the internet, and so people can teach from international schools, and finding teachers and professors that can contribute in that way. Anything I'm leaving out, Jeff?
I think you were correct.
Oh, thanks.
Any final thoughts that you would think the students important for them to take away, any of the other panelists?
One last thing I'll say is I would love to stay after and put my arms around each and every one of you and take photos for your Facebook pages, but it's not going to happen. Because literally I have to leave here and go to the airport. So I wish I could do that, but thank you for coming. But what else can you say?
Just want to ask you or challenge you, each one of you, to take action today. Do something, even if that means signing onto the letter, or deciding that you're going to talk to a professor, or you will make an appointment with your dean. Do not leave this room without promising yourself that you're going to do something about this issue.
Someone once defined the work of Amnesty International as mobilizing people of conscience in defense of prisoners of conscience. So there are ways to be active, whether it's joining Amnesty International, going to the website of Education Under Fire, writing an appeal, getting yourself to be more educated. I'm pleased to say we have an Amnesty chapter on the campus of Boston University. We welcome your joining that chapter and being active with us as well on this issue and obviously many others that are troubling us. Thank you.
A matrix of action that you can look at and decide what can you do. There's a spectrum of commitment, everything from going to the website, signing the letter, to approaching deans and professors. You can serve as TAs for part of the global affiliate of faculty at different universities who are offering these online courses. We need TAs to work with us to get the courses done. Finally, to continue this conversation, because it was kind of a bridge, Dean Elmore is hosting his Coffee and Conversation this Friday around this topic, Education Under Fire. So Friday, 3 p.m. in the Howard Thurman Center, we're going to continue this conversation that we weren't able to really get into today. Thank you very much to all our panelists.